The mansion was glowing with lights that night. Expensive dresses, glittering heels, men in sharp suits, and soft classical music played in the background. It was one of the biggest business parties of the year, hosted by Veronica Hale, the cold and proud CEO of Hale Enterprises. While everyone laughed and drank fine wine, a quiet maid moved between them. Her name was Amara. She wore a plain black dress, her hair tied back neatly, and her eyes never met anyone's for too long. She knew her place. Nobody looked at her except when they needed a drink refilled or a napkin picked up. Veronica stood at the center of the party, surrounded by rich guests, her voice loud and full of pride. "I don't believe in romance," she said sharply, swirling her wine. "Love is a weakness, unless, of course." She smirked. "You find someone who can play Chopin. That's the only kind of man I'd ever marry." The crowd laughed. Amara happened to walk by, holding a silver tray with empty glasses. She paused. Just for a second, Veronica noticed her. "Oh, did you hear that, Maid?" she said with a raised eyebrow. "Do you know who Chopin is?" Amara looked up slowly. Her voice was soft, but clear. "Which piece would you like me to play?" Laughter stopped. Everyone went silent. Veronica stared, not sure if the maid was joking. "You play Chopin," she said, smiling coldly. "That's cute." Amara just bowed her head slightly and walked away. The moment passed, but it left something behind, whispers in the air, raised eyebrows, and one very curious CEO. Later, that night, the mansion was quiet. The guests had left. Lights were dim. Amara moved through the long halls, carrying a mop and bucket. But she wasn't cleaning. She walked into the music room. It was a beautiful space-white marble floors, tall glass windows, and a grand black piano sitting like a sleeping dragon in the center. Amara looked around. No one was there. She stepped toward the piano and slowly lifted the cover. Her fingers touched the keys like they were old friends. For a moment, her eyes closed. Then she began to play. Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major flowed from her hands. Like water from a mountain stream, her back straight, eyes focused, heart open. The music filled the room, soft and sad, elegant and full of emotion. But she didn't know someone was watching. Behind the door, Veronica stood frozen, hidden in the shadows. Her cold heart, used to silence and power, was now cracking with every note Amara played. Her breath caught in her throat. Who was this woman? The next morning, Amara acted like nothing happened. She cleaned, served tea, and spoke only when spoken to. But something had changed. The staff looked at her differently. One of the younger maids whispered, "Is it true you played the piano last night?" Amara only smiled and said nothing. In the top office, Veronica stared out the window, deep in thought. Her mind was replaying the music, those soft notes, the way Amara's fingers moved like they were dancing. She felt something she hadn't felt in years, curiosity. And a little bit of fear. She picked up her phone and called her assistant. "Bring me the maid, now." When Amara stepped into the office, she kept her head down. Veronica sat behind her glass desk, legs crossed, expression unreadable. "You were in the music room last night," she said calmly. Double quotes, "Yes, ma'am," Amara replied. "You played." Like a professional, Amara looked up. "I studied music when I was younger," she said simply. Veronica leaned forward. "Then why are you here, wearing an apron, cleaning my floors?" There was silence. Amara's voice didn't shake. "Life happened, ma'am." Veronica looked at her for a long moment. Then she smiled slightly. "So, if I ask you to play in front of people, would you?" "I would," Amara said, "if I'm not ordered but invited." That answer surprised Veronica. She didn't say anything for a moment. Then she waved her hand. "You may go." Amara nodded and turned to leave. But as she opened the door, Veronica said, "You're not just a maid, are you?" Amara paused. Then, quietly, she replied, "No, ma'am, not always." And then she was gone. That night, Veronica sat in the music room alone. She placed her fingers on the piano, but nothing came. No sound, no music. Just silence. She closed her eyes, hearing Amara's Chopin in her mind. She couldn't forget it. And she didn't know why it affected her so deeply. Somewhere in the dark halls, Amara hummed to herself as she cleaned. Not to show off, not to be noticed, but because music is the only thing that ever truly belonged to her. And soon, it would change both their lives forever. The house was asleep. The moonlight passed softly through the tall windows of the mansion, shining silver on the polished floors. Somewhere, a clock ticked quietly, and the night air held its breath. But inside the music room, the air was alive again. Amara stood in front of the grand piano, her hands resting gently on the keys. Her apron was gone, her hair was down. For the first time in years, she looked like her real self, not a maid, but a musician. She sat slowly, as if asking the piano for permission. Then she began to play. The melody floated through the silent house, Chopin again, but this time softer, deeper. It wasn't just music, it was a story, a secret told with every note, a whisper from her heart. Amara's eyes closed. Her fingers moved with grace, but also pain. Every key she touched remembered her past. Years ago, Amara had a different life. She lived in a small apartment with her mother, an old upright piano in the corner. She played it every day, even when the roof leaked and they had no hot water. At 13, she was called a genius. At 16, she performed in a city concert hall. But something happened. Her mother got sick. Bills piled up. Music couldn't pay for medicine. Scholarships disappeared when she stopped showing up for practice. No one cared why. She was forgotten, and now, years later, the world saw her as a quiet maid in a rich woman's house. But the piano hadn't forgotten. Outside the room, down the long hallway, soft footsteps paused. Veronica stood in the shadows once again. She hadn't planned to come downstairs, but something inside her pulled her there. Like a magnet, she watched from behind the door again. The music hit her harder this time. It stirred something old and buried in her chest. A feeling she had locked away after her parents' divorce. After losing trust in people, after hiding behind business suits and cold smiles, she didn't understand how this maid could move her so deeply without saying a word. But she couldn't bring herself to step into the room. Not yet. She turned and walked away, heart racing. The next morning, the house was normal again. Staff moved around with trays and checklists. Veronica sat at her long breakfast table, pretending to read a finance report. But her mind wasn't on numbers. It was on Amara. She still remembered the maid's soft reply the day before. "I would, if I'm not ordered, but invited." No one had ever said something like that to Veronica before, especially not someone working under her. It wasn't disrespect. It was something else, dignity, and that made it even harder to ignore. Meanwhile, Amara washed the marble floor near the main staircase. Her back hurt, her knees ached, but inside her heart, something was shining again. Music had returned. She didn't care if anyone clapped or listened. She didn't want fame. All she wanted was to feel alive again. And last night, for the first time in years, she had. But she also knew something dangerous now. Someone had been watching. She had felt it. The presence near the door. She didn't turn to look. She didn't stop playing, but her body had sensed it. And she knew who it was. Veronica, later that day, a visitor arrived at the mansion, an old man in a gray suit, who was Veronica's childhood piano teacher. Amara, while cleaning near the hallway, overheard their conversation. You asked me to come," the teacher said kindly. "Yes," Veronica replied, standing near the piano. "I want to understand something." She sat down and tried to play the same Chopin piece she heard Amara perform, but her fingers were stiff. The notes came out broken, nervous, unsure. The teacher gently stopped her. "You're trying too hard," he said. "This music must come from the heart. You can't control it with power. You must surrender to it." Veronica stayed quiet. He added, "Whoever played this before you played with pain and love that cannot be faked." Veronica looked away. Amara had both, pain and love, music born from struggle. That's what made it real. That night, Amara returned to the music room, but this time, she didn't touch the piano. Instead, she sat near the window, watching the moon. Her hands rested on her lap, still and quiet. She thought about her mother's last words, "Never hide your gift, even if no one claps." She didn't know what Veronica wanted: praise, control, a story to tell at the next party. But Amara wouldn't let her soul be used again. If she played again, it wouldn't be for Soplanis. It wouldn't be for anyone else, only for herself. Back in her room, Veronica looked at her own reflection in the mirror. For the first time, she saw something cold in her own eyes, something hollow. She closed the music book beside her. Maybe it was time she stopped trying to understand the maid, started listening to her instead. Veronica Hale sat alone in her office, staring out the tall glass window. The city lights below twinkled like distant stars, but her eyes were unfocused. Her hand rested near a cup of untouched coffee. The strong woman who ruled boardrooms and crushed deals felt distracted. All morning she had tried to focus on her work. Emails, contracts, meetings. But Amara's music haunted her. Not just the sound, but the emotion behind it. It wasn't just skill. It was sorrow, strength, and something Veronica couldn't quite understand until she started. Remembering memories she had buried deep. She had been 12 the last time she saw her father. He was a jazz pianist, famous in small places but poor in big ways. He loved music more than money, more than business, more than anything, even his wife. Veronica's mother hated that one rainy night. After a fight that shook the walls, her mother packed their bags and left. She took Veronica and never looked back. Veronica never heard her father play again. That night, music became pain. She never played the piano again. She told herself it was childish, useless. She studied hard, built walls, and promised herself she'd never be left behind again. Love was weakness. Music was noise. But now, Amara's soft hands had played the very melody her father once did, and it cracked something in Veronica's heart. Later that evening, Veronica sat with her best friend, Lila, at a rooftop restaurant. "You've been quiet all night," Lila said, sipping her wine. "That's not like you." Veronica stared at her glass. "Do you believe someone can carry pain through their fingers?" Lila raised a brow. "This about that, Maid again." Veronica nodded slowly. "She plays like she's bleeding. But she never asks for anything. Doesn't complain. Doesn't even look for praise." Lila smiled faintly. "Sounds like someone I know." Veronica shook her head. "No, she's different. I control. She releases." Lila leaned closer. "Be honest. Are you afraid of her? Or of what she's awakening in you?" Veronica didn't answer. She didn't have to. In the mansion, Amara folded towels in the laundry room. Her hands moved automatically, but her mind was far away. She had felt Veronica's presence the night before. Not just near the piano, but in the energy of the room. Something had shifted, but she couldn't trust it. She had seen rich people before, how they used stories, how they liked collecting interesting people to show off at events. Amara wasn't a trophy. Her music wasn't a trick. It was all she had left of her old self, and she wasn't ready to hand it over. The next day, a letter arrived at the mansion. A high-profile charity event was being planned, a musical gala to support young artists. One of the performers had canceled last minute. The organizer wanted Veronica to recommend a replacement. "Why not you?" Lila asked over the phone. "I don't play anymore," Veronica said flatly. Lila laughed. "You mean you don't feel anymore?" Veronica's eyes narrowed. She ended the call, but her fingers itched. That night, she returned to the music room. She sat at the piano and forced herself to play. The notes were stiff, cold, robotic. Not like her father's. Not like Amara's, frustrated. She slammed the lid shut. "You can't force music," came a voice from the doorway. Veronica turned sharply. Amara stood there, holding a folded tablecloth. "I didn't mean to speak," she added quickly. Backing away, Veronica stood. "Wait." There was silence. Then Veronica said softly, "How did you learn to play like that?" Amara looked down. "I didn't learn to feel. I just never stopped feeling." Veronica nodded slowly. "My father played too, but he left. My mother hated his music, said it made him weak. So I stopped playing, and I started winning." "But you lost something," Amara said gently. Veronica met her eyes. "Yes, I lost me." There was a long pause. Then Veronica asked, "Would you ever play in public again?" Amara hesitated. "Not for money. Not for praise." "Then why?" "For freedom," Amara whispered. "For the little girl I used to be, who dreamed with her hands." Veronica walked to the window, her voice low. "There's a charity event, a gala. They need a performer." Amara looked unsure. "I'm not commanding you," Veronica added, facing her again. "I'm asking." Amara's eyes softened. "Let me think." And she walked away, graceful, silent, powerful. For the first time in her life, Veronica didn't feel bigger than someone in her house. She felt smaller, and it didn't scare her. That night, Veronica stood in front of the mirror, wearing a white robe. She looked at her reflection, not just her face, but her eyes. They looked tired, not from work, from years of pretending. She opened a drawer and pulled out an old photo, a little girl sitting beside a piano, her father smiling behind her. A tear slipped down her cheek. Maybe, just maybe. It wasn't too late. The sun rose slowly over the Hale mansion, casting golden light across the polished floors and tall windows. Everything looked the same, quiet, clean, controlled. But something invisible had changed. The house staff moved, carefully, whispering more than usual. They had heard rumors. The maid, the piano, the CEO. Some didn't believe it. Others were afraid to speak about it too loudly. But all eyes were now on Amara, and Amara said nothing. In the center of the house, Veronica Hale stood beside the piano. Her hands rested on the shiny lid, her mind far away. She had made the choice the night before. She was going to test Amara one's final time. Not out of cruelty, out of curiosity and fear. Was Amara really as powerful as her music made her feel? She called for all the staff to gather in the main hall. Cooks, cleaners, security, and assistants. Everyone stood in silence, unsure why they were being summoned. Amara entered last. Her eyes scanned the crowd and finally landed on Veronica, who stood like a judge in a courtroom. Veronica spoke clearly. "Today, we will have a performance," she said, "from someone in this room who holds a gift far greater than their title." The room froze. "Amara," she continued, "will play for us." "Ah?" A few people gasped. Amara's heart thumped hard in her chest. She didn't expect this. Not like this. Not in front of everyone. Still, she walked forward slowly. This isn't a command, Veronica added, her voice low now. You can walk away, no shame. But if you stay, you'll show them who you really are. Amara looked at the piano, then at the crowd. Her fingers twitched. She stepped toward the bench and sat silence. No one moved. No one whispered. Amara took a deep breath. Then she played. The first few notes were soft, almost like footsteps in snow. Then the melody grew stronger, like a quiet voice turning into a cry. Chopin's Ballade No. 1, full of passion, pain, and defiance. Every finger strike was sharp with truth. The room felt smaller now. The air tighter. The staff forgot they were watching a maid. They saw something else, a woman, pouring out her soul. Bearing a past none of them knew. Even the head chef, known for his coldness, wiped his eyes quietly. In the back, Veronica stood, still but inside. She was shaking. This was not a simple performance. This was a duel. A silent war. Amara didn't use words. She used music to show what she had survived, what she had lost, and what she would never let anyone take again. 10 minutes passed like a dream when the final note echoed and faded. No one clapped. Not because it wasn't beautiful, but because it was too beautiful. To Raw, they didn't know if clapping was enough. Amara stood slowly. She didn't smile. She didn't bow. She just walked back to her place in the crowd, picked up a tray of water glasses, and returned to her duties like nothing happened. But everything had changed. Veronica watched her with a strange look on her face. It wasn't jealousy. It was something deeper. Respect, fear, and maybe admiration. Later that day, Veronica sat in her study, a notebook open before her. She wrote just 3 words: I was wrong. Then she tore the page out and threw it away. She wasn't ready to say it out loud. Not yet. Downstairs, Amara was folding sheets again. Her back ached. Her hands still felt warm from the piano keys, but her heart was light. She hadn't played for them. She had played for herself. If they saw her now, really saw her fiend. If they didn't, it didn't matter. She knew who she was, and that was enough. That evening, while checking the dining table setup, a young servant girl approached her. I didn't know you could do that, she said shyly. Amara smiled kindly. There are many things people don't see when they look at us. The girl nodded. You made me feel like maybe I can do something great too. Amara looked into her eyes. You already can. In her room, Veronica sat in the dark. She stared at the piano through the open door, hearing echoes in her mind. Her father's playing, Amara's playing. Her own hands frozen long ago. She whispered to no one, she's not just a maid. Then she added, more softly, she's who I could have been, if I had been brave. The invitation came on a folded cream-colored card, placed carefully on Amara's pillow. It wasn't handwritten. It wasn't signed, but the words were clear. Dinner. 7 p.m. Music room. Just you and me. Amara stared at the note. Her fingers held it tightly, as if trying to squeeze out its true meaning. It didn't feel like a command, but it didn't feel casual either. Why now? Why her? At exactly 7 p.m., Amara entered the music room. It had been transformed. A single table stood in the center, draped in white cloth. 2 chairs. Soft lighting. A quiet instrumental song played in the background, not Chopin, but something gentle and unfamiliar. Veronica Hale sat on one side, dressed in a soft gray blouse knot, her usual cold, sharp outfit. Her hair was down, and her face looked ... softer. Amara paused at the doorway. You came, Veronica said simply. You asked, Amara replied. There was no smile, no joke. Just honesty? Please. Veronica gestured to the empty chair. Amara sat, her posture straight, her hands resting on her lap like folded paper. The silence stretched between them like a tight wire. Dinner was served by a butler, who quickly disappeared afterward. There were no guards, no noise. Just the quiet clink of silverware and two women trying not to look too deeply into each other's eyes. For a while, it didn't speak. Then Veronica finally said, "You surprised me." "I wasn't trying to," Amara answered softly. "But—" "You did," Veronica continued. "Not just your playing, but the way you carry it. You don't hide, you don't beg. You don't perform." Amara nodded. "I lived a life where people only noticed me when I failed, so I stopped trying to be seen." Veronica looked down at her plate. "I did the opposite. I made sure the world saw me, loud, strong, cold, and did it work?" Amara asked. Veronica paused. "No," she whispered. Amara took a sip of water. "Then why keep doing it?" "Because," Veronica said with a sad laugh, "if I stop, I don't know who I am anymore." Amara looked at her. "That's not true. You knew who you were the night you stood outside that door, listening." Veronica's smile vanished. "You knew I was there." "I always knew," Amara said gently. Your silence was louder than the music. Veronica leaned back. "So this is your game now? To show me I'm not in control?" Amara shook her head. "No. This isn't about control. It's about truth." There was a long pause. Then Veronica said, "When I was a little girl, I used to dream about becoming a pianist, not a CEO. I used to think music could change the world." "What changed?" Amara asked. Veronica's eyes hardened. "Reality saw my father, talented but poor, loving but weak. My mother left him, took me with her. She said, 'Dreams don't feed you,' so you chose power instead." Amara said, "Yes," Veronica admitted, voice lower now. "And now I have everything, but it feels empty." Amara looked at her for a moment, then said quietly, "Maybe you don't need to be filled by power. Maybe you just need to feel again." Veronica blinked. That hit harder than she expected. The dinner ended in silence. No arguments, no laughter. Just quiet as Amara stood to leave. Veronica spoke again. "Will you perform at the charity gala?" Amara paused, back, turned. "Do you want me to? Because you believe in me, or because it will make your company look good?" Veronica didn't answer right away. Finally, she said, "I don't know. Maybe both." Amara nodded. "Then I'll think about it." And she walked out, leaving Veronica alone. Again that night, Amara stood in front of her mirror. She touched her face gently. She had never seen herself like this before, not as a servant, not as a forgotten dream, but as a woman at the edge of something new. Veronica was changing, but so was she. Meanwhile, Veronica sat at her desk, looking at the untouched dessert. This dinner wasn't meant to heal. Not fully, it was meant to test. She wanted to see if Amara would break, if she would bend to pressure, if she'd become another puppet like the people in Veronica's world. But Amara didn't. She stayed steady, honest, strong, and Veronica didn't know what to do with that, because the lie of the evening wasn't the dinner. The lie was that Veronica believed she had all the power. But tonight, she realized something terrifying. Amara had something she did's, peace. The Hale Foundation's charity gala was the biggest event of the year, the grand ballroom of the Clarion. Hotels sparkled with gold chandeliers and velvet curtains. Cameras flashed. Diamonds shone. Voices murmured in soft, elegant tones. Everyone who was someone had come. Politicians, artists, business tycoons, media, all. Waiting for the surprise guest performer. But only two people in that ballroom knew the truth. The performer was a maid. Backstage, Amara stood in front of a large mirror framed by lights. She wore a simple black dress, not expensive, not loud, but full of quiet dignity. Her hair was pulled back, and a single silver pendant hung around her neck. She held her hands out, palms facing down. They trembled, not with fear of failure, but with the weight of truth. She had not touched a grand stage in years. Not since her mother's funeral. Not since the world told her, your music is not enough. And now, here she was about to face a room full of people who didn't know her name, her story, or her pain. Only one person had asked her to be here, Veronica, in the front row. Veronica Hale sat tall and silent. She wore a white gown, powerful, graceful. But inside, she was a storm. She hadn't announced Amara's name. She hadn't told the press. She didn't even tell Lila, who sat beside her, whispering so. "Who's performing?" "You'll see," Veronica answered softly. She hadn't done it for headlines. She did it for something she didn't fully understand. Yet, maybe redemption, maybe respect, or maybe because deep down, she still remembered the little girl who used to play piano beside her father, before she chose silence over soul. The host walked on stage. "Ladies and gentlemen," he smiled, "we end this beautiful evening with a special performance. A gift from the Hale family. Someone whose music needs no title." Whispers moved through the crowd. Then the lights dimmed. A spotlight lit the piano, and Amara walked onto the stage. There was a pause. She could feel their eyes. Some blinked in confusion, some raised brows. A few even whispered, "Isn't she a maid?" But Amara didn't flinch. She sat, breathed, and played. The opening notes of Chopin's Ballade. No, for floated through the air, it began softly like a secret. A story barely whispered. Her fingers moved gently at first, painting pictures of dreams, childhood, and quiet nights. Then the music grew stronger, faster, richer. Amara poured everything into it, the weight of lost years, the hunger of forgotten talent, the pain of working silently while her gift slept inside her. Every rise and fall was a memory. Her mother's hands, the cold hospital hallway, the tiny piano in the apartment, the job application for a maid's uniform. And now this stage. The room sat frozen. Not one person breathed too loud. Even the clinking of glasses stopped. The music demanded silence. Respect. Tears slid down one woman's cheek. A man covered his mouth, eyes wide. People weren't just watching a performance. They were witnessing a transformation. Veronica stared, her chest tight. She had seen power before in deals, contracts, and speeches. But this was raw, unfiltered, and completely unstoppable. When the final note rang out, Amara didn't bow. She simply lifted her hands from the keys. Silence. Then someone stood, clapped, then another, and another. Soon, the room rose as one standing, applauding. Some cheering, some crying. The applause was loud, fierce, real, and Amara. She smiled, just a little. Not because they clapped, but because she had faced them and didn't break. Backstage, Amara walked down the corridor, heart still pounding. She stopped near the dressing room, took a deep breath and found Veronica waiting there now. Cameras. No crowd, just the two of them. "I didn't do it for you," Amara said gently. Veronica nodded. "I know. I didn't do it for your company either." "I know." Amara stepped closer. "Then why did you invite me?" Veronica hesitated, then said, "Because I knew you had something the world needed. And I didn't want to be the reason it stayed hidden." Amara looked at her carefully. Veronica added, her voice low, "You were braver than I ever was." Amara smiled. "Maybe now, it's your turn." They stood in silence for a while. No one else in the building mattered at that moment to women. One stage, one truth, As Amara left the gala that night, a young reporter ran up. Miss, are you the new star Hell Enterprises is sponsoring?" Amara turned. "No," she said softly. "I'm not a star. I'm just someone who remembered who she really is." Then she walked away into the night. The cameras didn't follow, but her music stayed behind in every heart. Morning light filled the Hale mansion like soft gold, slipping through every window and warming the cold walls. But this time, something had changed. Not the house, not the staff, but the silence. It was peaceful. Now, not heavy, not hiding. It was the kind of silence that comes after truth is finally spoken and heard. Veronica Hale sat in her office, dressed in her usual gray suit. But she didn't feel like the same woman who had mocked a maid at a party weeks ago. That Veronica had armor, cold words, a wall around her soul. But now, she felt bare and lighter. In her hands, she held a small envelope. Inside was a letter, no gold seal, no signature, just simple, careful handwriting. Asterisk, asterisk, thank you for seeing me, but I need time to see myself. Please don't be angry. This isn't goodbye. This is space for growth, for peace, for music. Amara asterisk asterisk. Veronica read it again. Then again, each time. It made her chest ache a little. Not with regret, but with something unfamiliar, longing, not romantic, not desperate, but honest. She had made space for Amara's voice to be heard, and now she had to respect the silence that followed. Down the street, in a small, rented music studio, Amara placed a tiny framed photo on the piano. It was her mother, smiling wide, her eyes full of hope. "I'm here, Mama," she whispered, placing her fingers gently on the keys. Finally, she didn't play for a crowd now. She played for herself, and that was enough. Days turned into weeks. The video of Amara's performance at the gala went viral. Millions watched, commented, shared, but she didn't return a single call. She refused every offer, every deal. She wasn't interested in fame. She was interested in healing. Back at the mansion, changes began to appear quietly. Veronica hired 2 young musicians from underprivileged neighborhoods and gave them scholarships. She opened the music room to all staff, encouraging them to explore, listen, learn. She herself started practicing again, not to perform, just to feel. Each morning, soft notes floated through the halls. Not perfect, not polished, but real. And every time her fingers slipped, she smiled. Because now she could forgive herself. One rainy evening, Veronica stood at the large window in her room. Thunder rolled softly in the distance. A knock came at the door. She turned, expecting her assistant. But it wasn't single quotes. It was Amara wearing a simple coat, hair damp from the rain. Holding a small box in her hands, their eyes met. No words, just silence thick. With meaning, Veronica finally spoke. "You came back." "I didn't leave," Amara said quietly. "I just stepped into my own life." Veronica smiled. "And how is it?" Amara walked in slowly. "Strange, but beautiful." She handed over the box. Veronica opened it. Inside was sheet music, handwritten. Original, a composition by Amara. "No one else has heard it," she said, "but I want you to." Veronica touched the paper gently. "You trust me. I see you," Amara said. "Not the CEO, not the name, just you." They sat at the piano side by side. No stage, no crowd, no expectations. Veronica played the left hand, Amara the right. Together, the melody filled the room, gentle, honest, full of hope and second chances. It wasn't about being perfect. It was about being present after the final note. They sat in silence. Then Veronica looked at her and asked, "Do you remember what I said at that party?" Amara laughed softly. About marrying someone who could play Chopin? Veronica nodded. Amara smiled. I think you meant it as a joke. I did, Veronica replied. But now, I see how foolish I was. Amara stood, smoothing her coat. It's not about marrying someone who can play music. She looked into Veronica's eyes. It's about becoming someone who hears it. Veronica nodded and whispered, Thank you for teaching me how. As Amara stepped out into the rain, she didn't run. She walked slowly. Proud, free, behind her. Inside the mansion, music rose again. But this time, it wasn't Chopin. It was hers.